YouTube, how's it going? The Goat House is back after the divisional round of the playoffs here with a few things. We're going to give my takeaways and recap of the divisional round games, and we are also going to do my power rankings. Let's switch it up a little bit this week. Should be pretty interesting. So kind of a 2-for-1 special type of video. But yeah, first going to give my takeaways to each of the divisional round games. We have full playoff coverage here on the Goat House. We also have some offseason content and more of that rolling out. A lot of teams in offseason mode already. So join us here. Like, subscribe to notifications on. Follow us on Twitter. Latest thoughts, news, rumors, talking during live games on there. So it's a must follow. Link pinned in the comments. It'll bring you directly to that page. And there's also links down there for our sponsors, GLD Shop, Liquid IV, code GOAT on those sites. Walk the Mock, code GOATHOUSE50. Check it out. Links down below. So the first game of the weekend, and again, I'm going to recap all 4 games. Then we're going to go over some rankings, and we'll rank the teams that were eliminated as well. But the first game was Jacksville at Kansas City. Obviously, the Chiefs won 27-20. Maybe a little more interesting than we thought. A little close. The Jaguars had an opportunity to win this one. Maybe a couple opportunities. Maybe not to win, but to tie or to make it closer. They could have won this game. It was possible. I do think Mahomes getting hurt possibly played a part. I mean, Henny went down there and scored right away. Maybe the Jaguars didn't really know what to expect from a Henny offense. I mean, they drove, 95 yards? But Patrick Mahomes came back in, and he wasn't 100%. Obviously, there's times where he really wanted to take off and run and could not. So I do think that it did play a part in this game. The Chiefs could have put them away a little easier. And the Chiefs could have put them away easier if they stuck to Pacheco. The Jaguars' game plan was just to try to stop the pass, and Pacheco was running wild. Way better than McKinnon was too. He was running wild. He was so difficult for the Jags to stop because of his explosiveness, the quickness, and he was breaking tackles. The first guy really brought him down. So I know the Chiefs live and die by the pass, but your quarterback's hurt. I guess it was actually a tough thing for Mahomes was under center and then dropping back and handing off. That was actually a tough part. So that's probably why. So I guess deep down, you don't think of it right away, but when you think about it a little bit more, I think maybe Mahomes getting hurt actually affected the run game for that reason. They don't want to run the ball out of shotgun all day. So, yeah, it definitely did play a pretty big part. But the Jaguars were struggling to stop Pacheco. Jaguars got some offense rolling as well, though. ETN was a problem for the Chiefs. Perfect world, ETN maybe gets the ball a little bit more because what was he averaging over 6 yards per carry? But the Jags were playing from behind most of this game, but maybe they could have done a little better job getting the ball more. But the main thing is, I don't think it was a poorly called game by Peterson, but again, I think the main thing was they could have taken some more shots. They could have tried to get the ball downfield a little bit better. Chiefs pass rush was pretty solid in this game. They've been solid, better than I think people think. But I'm not recalling a whole lot of shots, and I think when they did throw the ball somewhat downfield, maybe minus that last interception, I thought they were doing pretty good. I remember that Kirk bomb, perfect throw, deep throw by Trevor Lawrence, difficult throw, dropped it right in there. Kirk drops the ball there. He's been playing great, but he drops the ball there. That was a big moment in this game, but it kind of worked. Some people don't realize, maybe some coaches don't realize, technically it didn't work because it was incomplete, but he was open, and it was a good throw. It was successful up until the point of him dropping it. So, therefore, it's something that could work as long as the receiver catches it. So, you should be trying it more often. So, I think that was another thing by the Jags. But they were very much in this game. And then Agnew, who doesn't get a whole lot of action on offense, finally does. And he fumbles the ball. I do agree with the fumble call there. And they get the ball back pretty quick, and then it was an interception. But the Agnew fumble, which Agnew was a beast on these returns, got them in position quite a few times, but that fumble can't happen. I do think that Kirk drop was a pretty big moment in this game. Chiefs pass rush has been underrated. It's very good. Young secondary is pretty solid. And I thought Pacheco had a day. Mahomes, what he was able to do, Kelsey had his way with that defense. But Mahomes, what he was able, the first drive was ridiculous. You can make a Mahomes highlight tape based on that first drive alone, and then is injured and able to, stay in the game at first, but then come back in the game and just do what he was able to do. Make some ridiculous throws that just some guys can't make, and there's quarterbacks that probably would have sat out with that injury. So, just a sight to see for sure. And just going forward, how will that? AFC Championship game, the Bengals, maybe the hottest team in football. a team that the Chiefs struggle with. How will Mahomes be? Will he, against a very good defense, is he 100%? That is the big question we all want answered, really, which the Chiefs really aren't going to tell us everything. You don't want to give away like if he's 100% or not for the Bengals to know. So that's the interesting thing there. But a good one for the Chiefs to move on. Jaguars have a bright, bright future. Remember, they're going to get Calvin Ridley back, or for the first time, really, next year. So that should be a lot of fun. They got a lot of young talent there. Trevor Lawrence continues to improve. So like where the Jags are heading. There. Second game was Saturday night game. Just there's not a whole lot to go over about this one. This game was over from the start, but you can't really tell that in the moment usually. But you could feel it in this one. It was domination by the Eagles' part there on pretty much every phase. We could start with the offense. I'm more impressed with the defense, but with the offense, well called, well prepared, offensive line, the trenches. We see that every time this year in the playoffs, quarterback play difference between the teams, and in the trenches, offensive line, defensive line, and that really stood out. All three of those things really stood out in a game like this. We see the Eagles, huge reason why they're this far. There's multiple reasons. They have a very, very good roster, a very good coaching staff, an improved quarterback. They have weapons, but I think the main thing is that offensive line. I think if you have that good of an offensive line, the best in football, you should be doing some damage this time of the year, all year, really. So that stood out. Really good play calls, just too much for the Giants to handle. It's just so hard, even for a good defensive coordinator like Martindale, to figure out how to stop this. Sometimes some of these teams don't really have the pieces to stop that type of offense. So you got to worry about so many different things. I think starting with the Hurts run and how do we get off blocks on this offensive line? They have weapons. They started off the game with a bomb downfield. That was huge. Taking a shot. You have the ability to do that because your offensive line. So I keep coming back to the offensive line, but the offense, well prepared, well called, well executed. I like the deep shot early. Kenneth Gainwell had himself a game. I think when he was on the field with the Giants, you're expecting him to run, and I think his speed was the difference. Kind of the open field speed was a pretty big difference. So he had well over 100 total yards, and most of that came from rushing. I want to say 112 around there. So that was impressive. But the defense of the Eagles, I thought this was an insane outing. And the Giants' offense all year wasn't like super great. They got the job done. They're coming off having a great offensive performance. I know the Vikings' defense is a lot worse than the Eagles. But I think people thought maybe they can get some offense going. But maybe they're not the strongest offense left in the playoffs, but it was an absolute clinic out there by the Eagles. And I think it starts with the defensive coordinator, Jonathan Gannon, who, at the later part of the year, the Eagles defense started to go downhill maybe a little bit, but this was a ridiculously called game, well called game by Gannon and the Eagles here. Just a lot of zone coverage. I saw a lot of cover 4, but mixing it up. They threw some man coverage in there here and there as well. But I saw a lot of cover 4, but watching, it was weird. Like I said it on Twitter too during the game, like watching these guys, it felt like there was so many defensive backs, like way more defensive backs than were actually out there. That's what it felt like. Every time it would show a receiver, it looked like 2 guys were on this guy, 2 guys were on that guy, and there was just no answer. And for Jones or the receivers, like they couldn't really comprehend what was happening with the zone coverage. Like who's where? Is this man or is this zone? And they were running right into kind of that spot where 2 defenders can kind of keep an eye on them. And it felt like Jones' main read on plays were always had 2 guys, even though it was zone coverage. They were like doubled in zone coverage. It was pretty wild. So it was a phenomenal job. And remember, people were saying like the Giants don't have the best receivers and they have Daniel Jones at quarterback, which is true. It's not the biggest threat. But, look at who the Eagles got. They got some really good corners, so that's number one. But safety, you got Blankenship playing out there. You got Marcus Epps playing out there. These aren't the best safeties in the world either. The corners did a phenomenal job, though. Slay and Bradbury can't get enough credit for what they did in this game, because just being able to mix up the coverages, play different coverages. But I think disguising, like, are they in man? Are they in zone? Because sometimes good corners could really sell. Like if you're in cover 4, you can really play it like it's man coverage, or you can do that with almost any coverage. But they were doing a really good job, almost covering guys outside their outside their zone, and staying on them if no one's in their zone, or leaving their zone in the right time to go get the correct, where the open guy is. So I thought those two, just breaking on the ball like young athletic freaks too. And Slay and Bradbury been in the league for a little bit, so though it starts with those guys. Those guys were outstanding. I thought the D line did great too. I mean, they got 5 sacks. The Giants were actually moving the ball quite easy after the Eagles easily scored, and they got a huge sack on 3rd down, and they got a great pressure on 4th down and Daniel Jones. I don't really mind going for it there. If I'm the Giants, you kind of know you're going to have to keep scoring, and they were able to move the ball to that point, so they thought they can do it again. But the Eagles brought some really good pressure there. But I thought it'd start with the secondary and how well prepared and how well coached they were in this game. So it was a big game for Jonathan Gannon, the Eagles defensive coordinator there. And the Eagles dominated, ever since, since the start of this game. And the Giants, it's some tough decisions coming up, because can Daniel Jones get by this point? He struggled to kind of read some coverage in this game. So how much do you extend him for? How long? Personally, me, I wouldn't do more than 1 year. I mean, an unproven quarterback, and he got better this year, but is he going to be able to get over these games, over the hump? Because we know that Daboll system is pretty damn good. It's a well-coached team there, so that with the right talent, they can win the Super Bowl possibly. So tough decision with Jones and Barkley. They need some receivers. They possibly need some interior offensive line. They need some corners. They need, even though I like Adoree Jackson, they need inside linebackers for sure. And did I say receivers? They need receivers pretty bad. So we'll see what they're up to. Interesting team to kind of watch this offseason. But the Eagles, very dominant in that game. To the Sunday games, I mean, just wasn't expecting more domination. Maybe not as dominant as the Eagles, but the Bengals played the Buffalo Bills and dominated this game from start to finish. I planned on picking the Bengals in this game until I saw they were missing 3 starting offense. I mean, we knew some of the guys are going to be out, but 3 starting offensive linemen. Thought that would be a problem. It was not a problem in this game whatsoever, and that was the impressive part too. I mean, just so well coached. I think it just starts with that. But that's the difference this game. Like, people maybe are saying how, even if you thought the Bengals were going to win, you're kind of thinking, how was this like the Bengals were clearly the better team in Buffalo. How was it that much of a difference? And it was one of those games where it felt like, like it wasn't like a fluke, or wasn't, one of those, like sometimes a team beats a team, and even if it's big, and you kind of get the feeling like, would that happen again? But based on the way this game was going, it felt like this would happen over and over and over again. Maybe with those elements, it just felt like that. Like the Bengals were just plain and simple better. But again, I think it starts with the coaching staff. I think number one thing that stood out, I thought they were more prepared. I mean, the Bengals, everything looked so smooth, and there was no thinking, and it just went out there and played. A little bit of hesitation with the Bills, a little bit of panic, a little bit they were flustered. I don't know, and maybe because they got down right away. But one team looked like a smooth, well-oiled machine, well prepared for this game, and the other team really didn't. So I think it starts with the coaching staff. But at the same time, the Bengals players too, they executed. They I think it starts at quarterback when it talks about the player. When we talk about the players, 2 elite quarterbacks that we would usually debate all day who is better. And Burrow just came out on top. I mean, he was smooth, relaxed, calm, made the big plays, and Josh Allen really didn't. It was weird to see that from Josh Allen. Just didn't seem like he was right. But at this time of the year, it's about who can figure out a way, who can get over this hump, who can make the plays even when things aren't going great. And the Bills have not been able to get over this hump, and the Bengals did it again. So, and what decides which quarterback is better or which players are better? Just ball games. Just watching the game, football. And in this huge stage right here, it determines a lot. I think this one game could just fully tell you that Joe Burrow is the best quarterback on that field, from that field. And coming away from a game like this, we weren't too far off from saying this before, so it's not like we're completely changing anything. But after a game like this, I think Mahomes and Burrow are kind of in the league of their own. I mean, some other guys are so good that they're not too far off, but it's still like you almost can separate them and put them in their own category right now. Just a level of play and the games that they could win. So that's a big takeaway from this game. But the Bengals just executed. There's moment the Bills had opportunities in this game and they just could not execute them, only with 10 points. So that was surprising to me, the lack of execution in the big moment at home. But from the start of this game, the Bills marched down the field and scored. And sometimes teams do that off the script. We saw the Bengals do it on the Bills last time they played them. And then the Bills get the ball, third play on offense, third down. It's single coverage, so there's only one safety over the top. Diggs is one-on-one. You'd like to think Diggs can beat a guy one-on-one, and he did, and Allen missed him. Of course, he had pressure in his face, but it's the throw he should make. He has to make. You have to make that throw if you're Josh Allen, if you're trying to win a divisional round. And it was not only going to be a first down instead of punting, but it was probably going to be a touchdown as well, because the safety was probably not going to be able to get over, maybe on an angle to stop him from scoring, but so just missed opportunities like that. Allen was missing Diggs all game, and Diggs shouldn't show his frustration as much as he did, especially after the game, leaving early. But you can see why he's frustrated a little bit. Allen was off. He wasn't getting the ball. It almost looked like Allen wasn't ready for the big moment, which we feel like Allen should be ready. Like he has to be. He's Josh Allen, but it's almost what it looked like. And I don't know if that's actually the case, but and I don't know if we can use the weather as a thing, because it's in Buffalo. They play in this weather all the time. So it's just weird. It was weird. But for the Bengals and keep kind of going out my story there, what happened in this game. So the Bengals actually get that stop. They get the ball back. They go down and score again. At this point, the third down seemed like the difference. The Bills kind of just choked their third down. The Bengals keep converting theirs. They score on a third down. It felt pretty damn early, and it ended up being the case the rest of the game. Third downs were the difference. Like if the Bills would have just hit the throws or execute on those third downs, or made a stop, like it's a whole different game. So you see how important third down is. But going back to that second touchdown to Hurst on that third down, this was just a beautiful, perfect play design and play call there. Everyone knows the Bills like to run a lot of cover too. So that means their corners sit in the flats, and the safeties, two high safeties, they got to get over to help on the boundaries. The Bills run a ton of that. They're very good at it. So the Bengals, it's a lot of with the play calling, whether it's offense or defense, it's kind of playing the guessing game. It's third down here. I'm going to go ahead. And Zach Taylor goes, I'm going to go ahead and thinking that's what they're running. Good guess there, obviously. Educated guess. So what he does is he has Chase sit in the flat, the most important weapon on the field, the best weapon on the field in this game. Typically NFL corners, especially good ones like Tre'Davious White in cover 2, they will usually, their responsibility is the flat. So within 7 yards, inside 7 yards, they're on the outside. But typically the good ones, they will kind of drop back a little bit and then fire up if they have to into their flat. So what Chase is just so damn important. He's just such a big piece. He just sat in the flat instantly. So Chase is like, he's in my zone. This is the best player on the field. So I got to get my ass up there. And somebody else came over to help as well. And they leaked Hurst out from inside out into that boundary. So the corner wouldn't be out there because he's so worried about Chase in his zone. And then Poyer's eyes are probably more so Chase going deep down the field or around that first down. And he still has to get over from kind of middle of the field where Hurst leaks out. It's just so difficult to stop that. It's one of those things like where you have to know the exact play to maybe stop it. So it's just a genius. It was you knew it was part of the game plan, play design, play call in the moment. Just absolutely genius by Zach Taylor. And it was Zach Taylor deserves so much credit in this game because, like I said, going into this, the first thing that stood out was the Bengals were just way, way more prepared for this game. They were more ready. They were locked in. You can just feel it, and that goes on the head coach. And the play, the game plan, like knowing your opponent, know how they play, know what could beat them. It's not going to beat everybody, but this will beat them because this is what they do. And the play calls, the play designs, this is a hell of a job by Zach Taylor. And the offensive line extremely beat up. If other teams had that offensive line in this game, I was trying to think like what other teams could kind of overcome that. I don't think any. I don't think any. There's teams that get stopped short or have awful seasons because of their offensive line. And on paper, that Bengals offensive line, without Jonah Williams, without Alex Cappa, without La'el Collins, it looks pretty damn bad on paper. I mean, Carmen ended up looking better than Jonah Williams, which kind of proves the point I've been saying that they've been insisting a little too much on Jonah Williams, but really besides the point there. But so great coaching on the offensive line. How about the coaching on defense? Lou Anarumo And we've been saying it for the last couple of years. There's just such a well-coached defense. We've been praising that. The last couple of years. They're just really confusing opposing quarterbacks. You don't know what coverage they're in as well. They really mix it up. That's why they were so good last year. Like 1 second they're in cover 2, then they're in man, then they're in cover 4, then they're in cover 3, back in man, cover. Like they can run any coverage. And there's some teams that just look at the Bills. The Bills defense is kind of known as better than the Bengals defense based on statistics throughout the regular season. But if you know anything, especially about the big games, in the playoffs, the Bengals defense is better. It's better. If the Bills had Von Miller, I mean, that gives them a big boost, obviously. But Bengals defense is just better. And we know Leslie Frazier's a good defensive coordinator over there, but I do think it gets predictable, maybe why it's not as good in the playoffs. And people were complaining about the defense all game, and rightfully so. It gets predictable. They were giving up big yards. The tackling was an issue, though. I mean, Frazier can't go out there and just make them stop the run, make them stop, make the first guy make the tackle. But it is pretty predictable there, obviously. But the people kind of blaming that, I do think are kind of wrong. I think you got to score more than 10 points. You have to execute on third downs. You have to hit your receivers. You have to find your receivers. You have to be able to figure out the defense if you want to we're at that point where, great quarterbacks got to take another step up. They got to make those big plays, and Josh Allen just did not do that in this game. So that's the first thing that was kind of surprising. Like, he's just got to be better if you want to be able to get over that hump, and you expect that from him. But just such a well-coached game by the Bengals, and they just executed more in that game. I liked how they went to the run game, too, and they realized that we can get this going, too. And they were able to run clock while still moving the ball. There's some good teams that struggle to do that, like, hey, it's time to run clock, but they kind of stop themselves from moving the ball. But the Bengals were able to do both, and that's a great job. So, dominant. Bengals look absolutely dominant. Was surprising. Not so much the Bengals won, but that they looked that dominant against the Bills in Buffalo. Next game, Cowboys and Niners, which I thought was the most entertaining game. I know 12-19 doesn't really look like it if you're just looking at the score, but I thought that it was the best game of the weekend. It was really back and forth, even though the Niners ended up winning by 7. It was really back and forth, mainly a defensive game. And really the story of this one is Dak played pretty bad. It was a rough game for him. He turned the ball over twice, bad interceptions, but they were still in the game. Like, that's the thing. Like, if you had said Purdy's not going to turn the ball over once, which the Cowboys had some opportunities, they didn't execute. And the Niners actually could have picked the ball off more probably, but for the most part, the Niners is a big part of this game. They executed on their turnover opportunities for their defense. The Cowboys did not. But Dak was a little more sloppy with the ball. But yeah, if you would have told me that Dak's going to turn the ball over twice, Purdy 0, I'd be like, oh, the Niners whooped their ass, right? They had to have. And the game was close. The Cowboys had an opportunity. It was really closer than the 7-point game the whole time too. So it's pretty crazy that Dak, their quarterback, one of their best players, played. Because did he do a whole lot offensively too? When the big plays that he made? I think, there was a lot of routine throws. I don't know if he really he didn't get sacked a whole lot, so I guess he was avoiding that. But it's just weird. Didn't play good. 2 bad turnovers. Didn't really make these huge plays. I mean, he made plays, and they were in the game. It's still crazy to me. It's still crazy. I thought they would have got their ass beat if that happened. I think most people, even Cowboys fans, probably would have thought that. So that was the tough part there. I mean, I thought the Cowboys, I don't know the exact pressure numbers, but I thought the Cowboys, it felt like, based on what I was watching, especially in key moments of the game, I thought the Cowboys pass rush pressured Purdy more than the Niners pass rush pressured Dak. I do think it maybe the Niners in the trenches on both sides actually really picked it up in the second half, but I don't know. The Cowboys got that pressure that they needed to get, maybe more than expected. And that was great. I guess to me that's why they were in the game. It's just still crazy to me that Dak didn't play great and he turned the ball over twice and they're in this game. It's still pretty wild in my opinion. I don't know. But that's kind of what it goes on. Like, if Dak doesn't throw those 2 picks, one led to a Niners field goal, and Gallup needed to fight towards that ball a little bit better, but that ball was way too late. It should not have been thrown. So first things first, it's on Dak. And the second one, the second one was weird because live I think I yelled, what did I yell at my TV? I yelled how because I thought CeeDee Lamb had it. Because the second he threw it, I saw Ward right there. I'm like, okay, Ward's picking this off. And also, the way Lamb was acting, I thought he caught it. So I'm saying how, but then all of a sudden it ended up in Warner's hands. And you saw the replay got tipped around a bit. So Warner was lucky to pick it off, but Dak was lucky Ward didn't pick it off. So it's not like one of those turnovers where like that team very lucky to have the interception. Like, no, the Niners should have had the interception. It should have been from Ward. And then it went through Lamb's hands, which would have been a fortunate catch. And then Warner ended up with it. It was a wild play, but it should have been picked off in the beginning to start with, So, and they were moving there too. I mean, if Dak doesn't throw that one interception, that second one, where are we at with this game? If he doesn't throw either, the Cowboys might win this game. I think chances are the Niners probably would have pushed the ball. It's hard to tell though, because the Niners were in clock running mode and they're able to move the ball at the same time of doing it. And they were still throwing while doing it, but maybe they would have done things differently and still won the game. It's definitely possible. But I think a lot of this game's on Dak. I know the coaching staff of the Cowboys always gets ripped. The last play was stupid, but we can't. People were trying to blame the whole thing on that. It's just ridiculous. Coaching staff was fine in this game. Nothing wrong with it. Play calling, I didn't see anything wrong with it. But besides that last play, but that's not why they lost the game. So I don't know. Dak's got to be better. It was surprising that, where he was at with the turnovers, at this year. I know he played the best defense in football, but he just plays you can't. He was a little late on those throws, and it's just throws he shouldn't be attempting either. But that's kind of the story of this game. Pollard getting hurt was pretty big because Zeke couldn't really help him. He dropped 2 balls pretty early on when Pollard came out of the game. And they were using Pollard quite a bit because Niners defense, very stout. The only chance you got is more the speed guy, the guy that can break one at any given time. So that made sense. So him getting hurt was actually pretty damn big in a bad way for the Cowboys, good way obviously for the Niners. But Kittle and Purdy got some crazy connection because Kittle's really been taken off as well. I thought Purdy played a pretty good game. He put a couple balls maybe in harm's way, but way better than I expected. He played better than the 19 points, though, at the same time. I thought they could have scored more points based on the way he was playing. The Cowboys, that give Cowboys credit, they were stopping to run early, which usually that's kind of the negative about their defense, the weakness. You can run the ball, and the Niners really could run the ball. The Niners, that is. So they were kind of slowing McCaffrey down early, but some kind of second half adjustments by Shanahan and that group. The offensive line was blocking better. Just the trenches overall, and they were able to take advantage, and they were able to run the ball. And Mitchell's a little bit more of a bruiser than McCaffrey, so that seemed to be a problem too. Mitchell was running very, very well. I guess he shouldn't have went out of bounds in that one play towards the end. That was very difficult to stay in bounds in that one, though. And he actually stepped out early. Maybe he knew that right away, so I don't know. But perfect world, he stays in bounds, run the clock a little bit more. Game might be over right then and there, or a couple knees later and a couple plays later, whatever. But he ran very, very well. Something with the adjustments in the second half because they were able to run the ball a little bit better. They were a little more physical, especially on the trenches than the Cowboys. It felt like they kind of played Niners ball, and they wore them out. There was a point where the Cowboys hit the field goal, and they actually hit it. And there was still plenty of time left, but the Niners just drained the clock. So much clock where you're going. The Cowboys probably should have went for it, but it was difficult to say in that time. But I guess it's difficult. It's easy to say now, but I guess, the Niners are anybody's capable of doing that. It is the Niners. They just could drain the clock from you, out-physical you on the ground. But the Cowboys were slowing them down all game, so I don't know. I don't really blame McCarthy for that, but I guess there was a chance that Mayer could have missed that. So maybe you could argue you could have went for it, I guess. But I think got the ball back. They had to punt right away too. Should you have went for that? It's just in your own end. They were stuck in some tough decisions there. But Purdy had some really good balls, mainly to Kittle. Even that one where Kittle had to make that ridiculous catch, that was actually a perfect ball. Even though it's a hard one for Kittle, it's where the ball had to be. So I thought he made some really good throws. I was impressed with Purdy in this game. And I was saying before this game, I can definitely see them just insisting on Lance, him being the guy next year. But after a game like this, I'm saying I'm kind of going against what I said just a few days ago. I'm thinking Purdy's got to be the guy. And not so much how he played, but one of my bigger takeaways of this game is Shanahan's trust, his confidence in Purdy. There's moments where they're towards their own end, or maybe not even that, but either one, and they're winning. They have control of this game. he still has him throw it. He still has him throw it in traffic, so the confidence he has in him, it says a lot here. And he probably, you got to believe that he can continue to get better, better and better. So it looks like Purdy's going to be their guy going forward based off that. So entertaining game. But again, just my biggest thing here is that the Cowboys were in this game, even with 2 interceptions. Is that a knock on the Niners in a way? That's really not my thought, but almost as you say that, it's like, the Niners probably should have put them away a little easier. It's weird, though. I know they had control. I know if the Cowboys, like you can sit here and say if Dak didn't have those 2 turnovers, they could have won this game. And that's very, very, very realistic to say. But something tells me if they had the lead or took the lead, or if they didn't throw those interceptions, the Niners, Shanahan, this offense would have found a way to take back that lead. But it is kind of stupid to say in the first place, because the Niners did create those interceptions because how good their defense is. So that's just Niners football there. So, so we're done with the recap. On to the rankings. So I changed things up a little bit here. So I usually make my power rankings based on how teams are playing, like in the now. So, but there's a lot of people that just can't comprehend that. For some reason, they want it to be kind of Super Bowl odds or whatever. So I kind of combine the things. So based on how teams are playing in the playoffs, based on what they showed me first, I ranked that. And I originally started with the Eagles at 1 and the Bengals at 2. My original thinking was the Eagles obliterated the Giants. Over from the start. It honestly didn't even look like they were trying for most of this game. And the Bengals were actually lucky to beat the Ravens in week 1. They didn't really play that great, but they technically did enough to win. So I was like, Eagles probably got to be 1, Bengals got to be 2. But then really just thinking about it, the Bengals, what I value more is what they just did now. And what they just did now in this case for the Bengals was beat the Buffalo Bills, who was a Super Bowl favorite for a lot of people who were still a juggernaut. They went to Buffalo in the snow and just dominated them. So that just says a lot, where I put the Bengals based on playoff play. I had to put the Bengals at 1. Eagles go at 2. I know they probably played the weakest opponent out of the teams this week, maybe. But the Giants were coming off a good win, but the Eagles just obliterated them, and it made it look so goddamn easy, and they played great on both sides of the ball. So the Eagles absolutely have to be top 2. The Chiefs go at 3, and I think some people may say that the Jags had a shot. They were pretty close with the Jags. And the Jags did have a shot. They were pretty close, but the Chiefs had control of this game. I thought they were great on all phases. The quarterback play was great, and he got injured, and they were still very good. They were dominant. The running the ball was great. They got a pass rush and made plays on defense. So they had control of this game. I actually thought, and the Jags, you can't take the Jags lightly. So I was impressed actually still with the Chiefs. And the Niners are 4. It's tough ranking anyone last because these are all juggernauts. They all played great. The Niners, they played some good football on both sides of the ball. They played, great on both sides of the ball in the second half of the Seahawks game. I guess they created turnovers and it was still close. That's the only knock on them against the Cowboys. They probably should put the Cowboys away. So I guess I was a little more impressed with the other teams. But just because I have a team ranked last out of the remaining teams doesn't mean I'm not impressed at all. It's very difficult only ranking 4 of the best teams in football. And then fit the Cowboys. The Cowboys dominated so I ranked the eliminated teams as well. Won't rank them next week. But Cowboys played dominant football in the first week, and they put up a really good fight with the Niners. They stopped the run better than expected. They slowed them down offensively. Despite turning the ball over, they still made some plays on offense. The Jags put up a good fight with the Chiefs. They also were dominant in the second half against the Chargers. They looked like the clear better team. They just started kind of fluky way. They played some good football against the Chiefs. They're able to move the ball on them. So they go at 6. The Bills look sloppy against the Dolphins. They still put up good points. But they look pretty damn sloppy. The defense didn't look right. They turned the ball over, and they just get dominated by the Bengals. I can't really sit here and say there was anything good about the Bills when they were home in the divisional round against the Bengals. There was nothing good about that. So they're actually under the Jags based off, and the Cowboys based off playoff play. The Giants at 8, great offensive performance in the first game. It's kind of just sort of looking like the Vikings defense might have been that bad. I mean, most of it was mess ups on their part. Like they'd half the guys in zone, half the guys, so they're just really messing up. Bad time to do it. But it's still a good outing for their offense the first week. On the second game here, They just got, again, they got obliterated. They got dominated. So nothing really good all around. The defense really wasn't good at all in the playoffs for them. So kind of going off chances to win the Super Bowl, which is kind of how people do their power ranking sometimes, even in the regular season. And I guess this would look a little bit different if it was chances to get to the Super Bowl, actually, which is weird. There's only 4 teams left, but chances to win, actually hoist the trophy. This is what I came up with. The Chiefs have been my favorite, so I'm going to keep the Chiefs there, but it's a bad matchup for them, it seems like, against the Bengals, and their quarterback is a little beat up. So this really isn't prediction for this week. I just still think the Chiefs are the team to beat when it comes to winning the Super Bowl. And I'll put the Bengals at 2. It's tough splitting these teams up. Again, all 4 are great. It's tough ranking 4 juggernauts. But I put the Bengals at 2. I'm just a believer in these AFC teams, which there are some matchups. Like if the Bengals play the Niners, I think that's a tough matchup for the Bengals because the Niners pass rush against that offensive line. So every matchup's different. So this isn't really who would beat who necessarily. But the Bengals are the hottest team in football right now. It's impossible leaving them out of the top 2, and I just think the AFC teams are better. The Eagles, I mean, it's hard ranking them at 3, though, because I don't want to base too much off one game against the Giants. Maybe not the strongest opponent in the playoffs, but it was so easy to them on both sides of the ball. I felt like they weren't even trying for most of this game. But just pure dominance. And the 49ers at 4, which, I mean, just such a complete team. The best defense in football. Like, you got to love the best defense in football. It's so well coached. See the second half adjustments. But actually winning the Super Bowl, it's still a little difficult for me to see Purdy having a better chance over Hurts, Burrow, Mahomes. So that's really, even though Purdy's impressing me, that's really the reason they're 4 in a ranking system where chances to win the Super Bowl. But if they played a team like the Bengals in the Super Bowl, I think the Niners would be favorites because it's just plain and simple. The trenches, the pass rush versus that offensive line. So again, this really isn't matchup predictions or who would win, each matchup. And I'd put the Bills 5, even though they didn't play great in the playoffs. They were still more of a Super Bowl team, even though they're not anymore because these teams are out, than the Cowboys, Jags, and Giants. I put the Cowboys next. I put the Jags at 7. I put the Giants at 8. So I average those 2 things out. How I think power ranking should be done and how other people think it should be done. I averaged them out, and that put the Bengals at number 1. And it kind of makes some sense because they are the hottest team in football. They're pretty fortunate to win that Ravens game still, though. And the Chiefs are 2, who've kind of just I've been insisting on them being kind of the Super Bowl favorite. The Eagles at 3, who are, all 4 of these teams. It's tough to rank anybody at 3 and 4, and you want to rank all these teams in the top 2. I'm a little bit more of a believer in the AFC teams in general, but again, a certain matchup could change that. But yeah, we kind of explained these teams. They're all great. And the Cowboys end up being 5, the Bills 6 with a disappointing playoff outing, and the Jags 7, and the Giants 8. So that's how I decided to rank the remaining playoff teams and the just eliminated playoff teams this week. Kind of did the same thing last week, even with the teams in a different way, but with the teams that were eliminated. It's what I do every single year. So hopefully you guys enjoyed all this. Kind of a 2-for-1 special type video here. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments. We're always talking with you guys on Twitter, always talking about anything football on Twitter. If you like our channel, you need to be following that Twitter. There's a link pinned in the comments for that, as well as our sponsors. So check those things out. We'll have more playoff and off-season content rolling out this week and every single week, every single day. So join us, like, subscribe, turn notifications on. That's going to do it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.